Thomas has a PhD and a MA in economics from the University of Chicago and BA from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. He has authored numerous books on macroeconomic, social, and environmental issues, among which include The Quality of Growth, published in 2000 by Oxford University Press, and The Multilateral Banks and the Development Process in 2012. He also taught at the Vassar College in New York and the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and has addressed numerous professional fora in all regions. Let us welcome Dr. Vinod Thomas.
Thank you very much, Susan, for that warm. It's a great pleasure to open up today's discussions on a very tough topic. One is it's about evaluation, but the other is it's about sustainable development, which by itself is a complex and difficult topic. While it's urgent and perhaps determines everything else, but then to evaluate that in a meaningful way, in a convincing way, and then to make any difference and to do so in real time is overwhelming. And would you agree that we have not done very well on that? To Z, thinking about sustainable development clear-headedly and evaluating that, even incorporating that in evaluation, and let alone having results, and having results in time when it matters for policy making. So the agenda is great, but flipping that around in this brief moments, I thought I will focus on some examples where it has worked or where it has made a difference. But please keep in mind, these are boutique examples. They are not mainstream, widespread examples that change the world as they stand. Because we know that the environmental challenges are about to derail even straight economic growth. Climate change, of course, is one particular feature. So, very exciting agenda. Congratulate the organizers for really putting this on the table. I just hope that the deliberations and the wisdom and knowledge of this group will get out of this room and really make a difference, because the real audience for some of the discussion here is not here. I think I'll probably get a lot of agreeable nods from this group today, which is great. But it really is with the finance ministers, the planning ministers, the policy makers, the budget deciders, the practitioners who have criteria which are very much understood and rational, but they just fall short of taking account of perhaps one of the most critical things that matter today. So the slides are several, the details are a lot. That doesn't matter. I think we'll share the slides. My good colleague Andrew is here. We'll share the slides, and so we won't get bogged down by them. But just to get us going, the first active policy discussions as though economic growth didn't matter. So we need to put that front and center, regardless of various ways in which we think about it. And the positive side of it is that income poverty is definitely related to economic growth. And that is almost a tautology, because poverty is defined by income, growth is defined by income. If A goes up, the other goes down, unless income distribution changes. So when people say, well, poverty and income are related, it's not a discovery, it's just almost a tautology. So let's accept that as an important point. And so raising economic growth is the single first objective of policymakers. And if that is the case, and I don't have any issue with that, then the question is, what do you think about social inclusion and environmental protection? One way to think earlier on had been that these two are good to do, are good to have, but there is a trade-off that is very hard to take. Simply put, bad programs of income inequality reduction, they hurt income growth. Inequality reduction in that way are at loggerheads, or environmental protection, switching from fossil fuels to renewables, it's more costly. So one way to think about it is that they It's nice to have environmental protection, but let's do it a bit later when we can, right? I think, and you can relate to that, right? Sustainability. Think of generating growth, that's the first block, and then adding to that education and health and social protection as a way of making growth more inclusive. This is an approach many MDBs, including ADB where I work, has followed, and to a large extent, I think it's actually very good in the sense that we are putting some emphasis on the three pieces of inclusive growth. But if you believe the earlier thinking that I mentioned, that growth itself depends on inclusion, then you want the first pillar, not any growth, but growth that is more inclusive also. And that means how can we generate growth that perhaps disproportionately includes, not benefits, not handouts, but includes the lower income strata in the growth process. So that's inclusive growth that is helpful for sustainability. And then, if you believe in that, then investments of various kinds in the social and natural capital play a big role. Okay, with that, let me switch gears on to more directly dealing with sustainability. And in this group, we have practitioners who think about what actions are necessary, people who actually work on those in the field, and there are people who evaluate and hopefully influence the first two, and vice versa. It's an iterative process. So if that's the case, making growth more sustainable and evaluating that starts with valuing and investing in the natural capital side, which really gets short shrift. So one example of that is the lower panel. I'll just focus on that to illustrate my point. If you look at the last 30 or 40 years, you will see that natural disasters have been on the rise. And this is a global picture. You see this even more striking for Asia. And you'll see that geophysical phenomena, terrible as they are in terms of human life lost, the lower ones, the brown, the earthquakes and the volcanoes, they have been fairly steady. But you will see that the hydrometeorological ones, floods, storms, droughts, and heat waves, especially important in Africa, those have been on the rise. And you have to ask the question why. Then, not incorporating how we take care of the natural capital, contradictory to making growth sustainable. So that is just to make that point loud and clear. Having made that point, though, now we come to the real, okay, we all agree. So it'll happen. Why doesn't it happen if we believe that valuing natural capital is important? So what is the problem? Why is action? Perhaps the biggest disconnect today between knowledge and action concerns the phenomenon of natural capital, environmental destruction, biodiversity loss, not to speak of that, and then climate change. And so why the disconnect has to be taken on, right? So there are trade-offs, and there are policy issues that bring that out very clearly. In the very limited time, may I try a thought which we can discuss at more length. And they build on the kinds of trade-offs today versus tomorrow: food, energy, water, forests for livelihood, forests for carbon, land urbanization and the disaster, and so on which these policies of fuel subsidies, renewable energy, natural resources, and just straight safeguards of any project, all of those are related. We have that picture clear, right? That's the picture. Within that, can we think that there may be some sets of actions where you have really win-win outcomes? So why not just go to town with those? What would be an example of a win-win? Meaning, okay, trade-offs are all there, but look, I can tell you here's a list of things on which if you took action, it's good for the economy, it's good for society, it's good for the environment, it's good for everybody. What would be some examples of that? One that I can think of right away is energy efficiency. And we know 20 to 25% losses, that could be a deal breaker for businesses and also for society, and then the price of electricity to the people. So if that were taken on head-on with demand-side and supply-side actions, that could come close to a win-win. Honestly, we have a long list of win-win options. So why not act on them yesterday? Second, can we think of not quite win-win, but net win, meaning they are win-win for the society, at least for tomorrow, but somebody is going to lose. Okay, so what would be an example of that? Staying with the same picture of energy, an example of that would be energy subsidies. If you took away fossil fuel subsidies, that would be socially as well as environmentally profitable, but somebody will lose. So there will be strong special interests that would fight against that. But you could argue that that still presents a net win. And so still a strong basis for action, but a little less compelling than the first win-win. And then you could say there are real trade-offs, and you need the political economy really to work for you to get that action done. So what would be an example of that? Staying with the same scheme, it probably would be renewables, investing in renewables. That is more expensive, at least in recent past. It's changing very rapidly, and there some gain, some lose, but it also presents a cost to growth, perhaps in the short term. Still, it is good to do in the long term, but you really need public policy to make that possible. So the degree of difficulty of A, B, C that I mentioned is different. That's one framework to think about it. And so if that's the case, are we okay with spending 5-10 minutes on the methods of analysis? Are we okay with that? Okay. So we have very challenging issues. We can make the problems manageable in terms of understanding it and communicating them. But the evaluators have a tough time working on them and having something to put on the table, really, on sustainability. I'm not saying on every issue, but on sustainability, right? I mean, we're only talking about the failure or the gaps in evaluation when it comes to sustainability. So it's not an indictment. It's just saying this isn't going well enough. Okay, so a lot to talk about. One, I want to say that if we could embrace the benefit-cost framework, cost-benefit framework, that would help a lot, especially on sustainability. Why is that? Don't we do that all the time? I mean, what's so great about cost-benefit analysis? Andrew Warner at the IEG some 8 years ago did really a very interesting paper on how cost-benefit analysis has just taken a downturn when it should be taking an upturn, kind of on the presumption that, oh, well, if it was infrastructure projects, we could have done that. But now we are doing more of education and health. You cannot do that. False. You need to do them for both. And so why it is especially important for the issue that we are discussing today, sustainability, is because of externalities, that is, spillover damages. Spillover benefits would have been nice, but spillover damages that really are not taken into account by simple calculus of what you count. It's the unintended ones, it's the indirect ones, pollution, congestion, and the list is long. So those need to be come in that market prices may not quite reflect. So one strand of stress for me would be take benefit cost analysis more seriously and really incorporate and don't hide under the premise that, oh, we cannot quantify, so we don't know. That's almost dangerous because we can quantify costs of some of these things. So if you only put the cost of taking action, meaning if you did more on let's say, fuel subsidies, there are some costs. If you counted that, but if you didn't count the benefits because it's harder to count, you will give misleading policy conclusions. So you need to always, always, always have benefits and costs in the same page, in the same table. Don't put it in two different tables because you take one or the other. Similarly, not just the benefits. If you are excited about a project and you only count the benefits, but what if it really displaces people big time? That's not a great idea either. So you've got to put the costs through. But having said that, an example of how it makes a difference to do benefit cost analysis, including externalities. It's an IMF paper. They didn't think of it as an evaluation. It was not an evaluation paper. But we should cite them if you're an evaluator in our work. I'm just staying with the same examples to give some flow. The energy subsidies, fossil fuel subsidies, when you calculate purely on market price basis, they are about $500 billion in the world. Okay, that's a lot. So that is how much subsidy is given to coal and everything else to generate energy. The IMF calculation is that if you had counted the local, not the global, the local health damages coming from fossils, that number goes up by 10 times. It's 5 trillion. Now, you can debate, oh, is it that big? That's different. But if you didn't have a little bit of that into the thing, into the discussion, you would have the wrong conclusion that fossils are cheaper than everything else because you didn't count the health effects. So that's an example of cost-benefit analysis, market prices, externalities, etc. And then we can go down the list of green accounting that better takes into account these things. There's some good work from GEF, from the World Bank, from others, from the UN system, some great pieces, and bringing in the social calculus. And safeguards, we'll say a bit about that later. And I left for last the impact evaluation because that, in a way, like the benefit cost analysis, is a shorthand for summarizing what we could do better to incorporate in the evaluation framework sustainability issues. Without calling them sustainability impact evaluations, there's a lot of examples, and Manny, who's going to give the commentary in a minute, I'm waiting for that, will elaborate on that. But just to say that sometimes you get surprising results. The forest protection one is an interesting one. Ken Chomitz at the IEG did a very interesting piece on protected areas and found that, yes, protection helps to protect. Well, that itself is good to know because one feeling is that it's a waste of money. But where protection is there, definitely there's a clear difference in how much was protected versus if you didn't have them, the counterfactual. But the interesting finding was that that result was more true for areas closer into the cities where you might think, oh, maybe you shouldn't protect as much because of the conflict with employment generation, and much less in the pristine areas, because in the pristine areas, there would have been protection anyway. But putting it in numbers, the examples came from Brazil and Indonesia. I think Brazil in particular, it was just very striking to see that. Many other examples, the SME that I mentioned, since I see Bin, I can mention that quickly. Very interesting. I mean, SMEs, small and medium scale enterprises in Vietnam versus, in this case, we are comparing Vietnam and Bangladesh. Sorry, Vietnam and Pakistan. And there, the efficiency side, that is how well that program goes, went in favor of Vietnam. In other words, the impact that you observed of reaching the poor, the ones that were intended to receive the benefits, it was better. But the accessibility, or how much of the very poor you did have reached, that was stronger in the case of Pakistan. So with that impact evaluation, looking back, you could get a sense of some kind of a trade-off that if you really try to reach the very poor, great, as Pakistan did in this case, but in terms of efficiency and the sustainability of the program, Vietnam came out much stronger. Are we okay on time? Yeah. Okay. On the methods, here we have 5 strands to stress. Impact evaluation and benefit cost analysis are the 2 that I kind of put as the umbrella. A lot of examples we can use to make the point, but at the end of the day, I'm just of the view that it really doesn't matter that you put it in some rigorous framework, whether it's impact evaluation, you call it rigorous impact evaluation, or benefit cost analysis, and you say it's highly quantified. More important is to have that framework and list the things that you feel really matter, and give an order of magnitude of how big they are. Don't list everything, but list the 3 top things. And then say, look, if A and B were really important, this is where I come out. And go to town in real time when decisions are needed. So evaluators have a task on the methods, a lot to be said on that, I'm sure in the discussions they'll come, but also on the process. Have the results in time. I've had lots of examples where we fine-tune, and then the decisions were made, and then we come with an exposed thing that sits on the shelf. So please keep that in mind in our timing issue. The next 3 or 4 slides, I'll go very fast, just to say that we can apply the framework of cost-benefit analysis, impact evaluation, or simply counting the 2 sides of the ledger that includes sustainability in the way you understand it and is most relevant for a particular country. Have it available in real time, and you can do that in the use of sustainable land use. Examples, especially that we have compiled, the environmental side, but equally for the congestion and the time loss side, and how we can assess them in terms of the benefits and costs. Energy is another example where, just flipping back to the earlier case of win-win, let's say, win-win. Okay, this is a good deal, energy efficiency. That you would think would have gotten addressed, right? Because I didn't say that in the case of win-win, there were a big problem on the political economy. So why are win-wins not adopted all across the board? So here, in the case of the China example, sorry, am I not there? Yeah, sorry? There was a comment, yes. The win-wins? Yes. Okay. As we think. Energy efficiency I mentioned. I agree with that, right? But let's go to other fields, and then in our discussion, take up a few more win-wins that actually benefit everybody. Still, there's a few. Okay, a few. So it's a little bit more than rare. That's why, otherwise, that's why I put that up, and I have some examples in mind. But just in the interest of time here, even in the case of energy efficiency, this slide doesn't mention the example I have in mind, but doesn't matter. In the case of China, IFC had a program which many colleagues who was evaluated. Interestingly, the consumers liked the idea. The producers liked the idea. It's good. Evaluation was very positive on that example of financial intermediation as a way of bridging that win-win that was not being captured. My gut feeling is that there's a longer list of those where we are missing one piece, but a big, important piece. Can we list them all and come up with 100 things the world must do today, which are win-win, and they are being not addressed, not for malice, but we are missing the financial intermediation, we are missing the social participation, we are missing the information, and sure, we're missing the knowledge exchange. I mean, that's a classic thing that's being done in Brazil. Did Philippines learn from it? And we'll have one example of that going the other way in a minute. Please let me know if you are okay on time. This could get longer than I want. So safeguards, I'll leave this for a while, in the sense that these are the do no harm side of the story. Much of what we said so far is do good side of the story, but do no harm is also very important because infrastructure financing is going to expand. The AIIB is devoted to infrastructure. The New Development Bank of the BRIC countries is devoted to infrastructure. The World Bank is reforming safeguards applications. ADB, my colleagues are here, Walter is here, and is Tomo here today? No. So the team is also working on a very, very important one on the evidence of what difference do safeguards mean. There are people who know a lot about this, but I wanted to stress that the same framework of benefit cost analysis must apply to safeguards. There are some who look at the costs of safeguards. In this case, what do we mean by cost of safeguard? Cost of having them. So how much staff time goes into it, and also does it even delay and even let you lose some operations because you're doing too much of that? That's the cost side. But you also have to marry with the benefit side. What is the benefit side of safeguards? It is the avoided damages, and that can be huge. Volkswagen had a recent unbelievable example. I just still can't get over it. How this could happen, that you would literally have a system which you try to undercut at the expense of people's health, even when there are safeguards. So the benefits of having safeguards, if well implemented, would be the avoided damages to people and the planet. So that's a subject for a whole discussion, but it belongs to the list while it is do no harm in characteristic. In the same list of what we worry about on the framework, we touched on climate change and natural disasters. Quick example, again, switching to the positive side of the story, what can be done. This is an incredible example. The cyclone in Bangladesh, look at the 1970, 255 kilometers per hour, killed 300,000 people. The same intensity, roughly speaking, 97 and 07, right? Same intensity. And you cannot say density of population was different. It had higher. It is higher. So I'm giving you a table that is comparable, if anything unfair, to what was achieved. The number of deaths is still very high, but compared to 300,000 and so on. So if you didn't have the benefit cost framework, was the expenditures, investments on that justified? You get the wrong answer. But if you have the benefit side, in this case, deaths avoided, it's a no-brainer, right? So all of that belongs to the same framework of impact evaluation, cost-benefit analysis, even if the quantification may be a bit loose in the following sense. Finally, I just want to make one final point, that it's a fast-moving agenda, it's a fast-moving world, and how do we draw lessons and apply them? Is it linear? I mean, we looked at the Bangladesh case, so that happened in the past, so now the next 30 years, what should be done is based on that. Or is it different sometimes, non-linear? And I want to argue that especially when it comes to sustainability, it is very non-linear. That yes, we should draw from the lessons and feed in the cost-benefit analysis, feed in the impact evaluation, et cetera, with past experiences. But it's a small example from ADB's involvement in China. Just focus on a couple of things. Look at the success rate, 1998 to 2005, 97%, when ADB was doing straight infrastructure projects. Build 75 kilometers A to B and repeat it. Okay, and they were successful. 97 is as good as 100, and it's almost frighteningly high. And you wonder, how can it be that high? What kind of criteria are you using? So it's so very high. So linear would be, if you have successful projects, do more. Do the same. No. Those justifications have changed. One, for an organization like ADB to be involved in a middle income to going to high income economy, doing just the same makes no sense. Why a public organization like ADB? It would be much more what countries can do with the financing that they can access. But the switch in this case is a positive story. More than 90% switching to a different type of engagement, although the past was successful. So a little advertisement. We did a book in the World Bank, and my colleague, I think Andrew, has a number of copies. It has a chapter on water, where we make the point. Shube Luo, my colleague, and I did this, that water projects were one of the most successful ones in the past. The conclusion from that we drew is not to do the same again. Because they were heavily access-oriented ones, and that was on a track to going somewhere. But the groundwater issues and the complex issues around the tables were so tremendous that switching to a different portfolio for an organization like the World Bank is value added was a great. So the past, a guide to the future. Last two slides, pilot and innovation. Maybe that is a subject for a whole hour. I think in many of these cases we are experimenting, so it makes sense to pilot. But then, so there are some funds available for that. But if I may generalize, I don't know if you agree, pilots have not been followed by evaluations that then ask you to scale up or not scale up. Pilots end with pilots. The whole point of pilots are to evaluate. So all organizations seem to be restricted on that. And so I want to say it's a crime, because that's really what the pilot is for. And if we don't evaluate them, what is the use of having a pilot? So yes, there are some good facilities, some good windows, but it's not being used well. And then big challenge, especially in the case of pilots, especially for sustainable development, especially for these complex issues that, you know, we have differences of sentiments. How do we treat innovation and risk-taking? Because they come in even more so than in many other cases, right? Because you have difficult issues, so you innovate, try to solve the problem. Do evaluators motivate innovation, or do we discourage innovation? The examples I gave, the repeater projects, build the 70 kilometers over and over and over again. I've looked at some of them. My colleagues have looked at some of them. They do very well by evaluation ratings. So if you want to be a bit risk averse in terms of not getting a bad rating, you would just repeat the tried and true, even if the development effectiveness would have been so much more, even with some failures. Failure is okay. If you had done those innovative ones that take on board some of the points that we discussed. So evaluation must not favor risk aversion. We might even go further and say motivate risk and innovation, and then replication and scaling up of pilots, and then when successful, go to town. One little example from our ADB work recently, we had a project from the Philippines, and that involved going from incandescent to more energy efficient technology. It had CFL, and it had relevance, efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability. What is sustainability in that case? I mean, there's a sustainability with a big S here. There's a sustainability with a small s in our methodology. It's usually considered to be financial sustainability. So we said, what the hell? I mean, Farzana is here, we're going to do this for the future. Said, let's include financial, institutional, which has been there, plus environmental and social, right? Put them in, why not? If you did that, this project, which the self-evaluation said, it's sustainable. And there was even some question, the financial part, right? It may or may not be absolutely for sure, but it was okay. But we thought that the environmental sustainability is high. Not okay, but it's high. So the evaluator, the independent evaluator, upgraded the self-evaluation from okay to super okay. And can we do this more once in a while? And that would help give the message that evaluation is not there to discourage innovation, but to encourage. Time is running out, and so very important, wherever we come out specifically on methods and so on, process of capacity development, not building, capacity development is a two-way process. Learning events like this one, exchange of views like this one, views from the beneficiaries. How many times do we build an evaluation based on what the beneficiaries think, and with lots of field visit? Impact evaluation to go beyond social sectors, which I think we'll hear from Manny. In the past, we may have looked at under the lamppost and kept doing the same thing that is easy to do But the complex issues of sustainable development, I complained 5 years ago that it's not getting any attention. We keep doing impact evaluation again and again on conditional cash transfer until you're tired, because that's easy to do. How about taking on climate change? How about taking on biodiversity laws? How about taking on sustainable livelihoods? How about taking on water, agriculture? And I think the changes are afoot, and there's a list from 3IE, it's quite impressive. But I would like to see that change huge if these issues are. And then the evaluation development support, like the one from ship debt, colleagues are here, from CLEAR, 3IE, ideas, the hosts here, the NEC, UNEG, ECG itself, which the multilaterals and bilaterals are in one way or the other participants. Now, all of that would be tremendously helpful. With that, I just want to thank you all, and there's some list of publications that we can access through the internet, and the book from Andrew, if anyone is interested. And I thank you very much for your attention, and most importantly, best wishes in the precious work you're doing. Thank you.